Hello, ARC family. Welcome to the ARC journey. We've been talking with Rob Guy about God's story using the Allegheny region and so much that has been accomplished that God has used us for. One of those great accomplishments, and one of those deep missional things, was founded in the Barkeryville Academy. And Rob's going to talk to us today about that. So take it away, Rob.
All right. Well, last time we talked about that reunion of the Academy in 1962, and today we're going to do kind of the same thing, different. We're going to do a flashback, probably going back about 70 years. But there's this picture here of the Barkeryville Academy. This is actually the Barkeryville Academy boarding house, and there's a reason that I'm focusing on this particular picture and this particular building. Um, the Barkeryville Academy itself was a collaborative um, initiative, and the Barkeryville Academy boarding house was also a special um, initiative that was a collaborative work. A lot of people, I think, don't realize that the Church of God took a long time getting an educational organization. Finley College has been part of our story for so long, we just assume it's always been there. But it hasn't always been there. The Barkeryville Academy and Finley College started at about the same time, though they were at two different levels. And it's one of the characters that we'll discuss one of these days is John Latshaw, who, as a 30-year-old man, the youngest college president in America at the time, was both principal of the Barkeryville Academy in one state and president of Finley College in another state at the same time. Those were exciting times. And as I mentioned last time, these guys knew they were exciting times and they were a part of it. Um, but another thing people forget is that the Barkeryville Academy didn't just serve Barkeryville people. Um, it was a big deal for the churches of God to finally get an educational institution started. It began in 1881, 3 years before Finley College. John Latshaw started it, and it quickly, like in 2 years, became the West Pennsylvania Eldership Initiative. They all got on board, even though Henry Barkey fronted the cash. The West Pennsylvania eldership owned the property, endorsed the initiative. The churches supported the school. They sent their young people there. The pastors throughout the West Pennsylvania eldership served as the board of trustees. And the best and brightest from across the Church of God came to West Pennsylvania to teach in this institution. And you'll hear people to this day say, yeah, five of the first six presidents of Finley College came from this organization in Western Pennsylvania. That's because that's where the action was. It moved on, things change, but at the time, this was the place. And we were part of that. The boarding house there is another exciting thing, especially for the West Pennsylvania Conference, because um, again, Henry Barkey fronted the cash, but he was an old man at the time, and he was not going to build this building by himself. So, but because Henry Barkey and the Laux were interwoven, kind of intermarried, um, Alverton and some folks from Mount Pleasant got on their horse and buggies and they brought teams of workmen up. I don't know how many days it would have taken for them to get here. It's not like you just jump in the truck and show up. But they brought work teams up and they helped to build this building together. And well, they knew If people are going to come to the academy from far away, they're going to need a place to sleep. They're going to need somebody cooking for them. And what's interesting about this building is if you're looking at the picture and they're all looking at you, where you're sitting is where the Huntsberger house was, just across the lane. And in this picture that you're looking at, three of the Huntsberger girls are in there. They're not there because they needed a place to stay. They lived right across the lane, and their own house served as the overflow place for students to stay. But somebody had to help cook the meals, somebody had to clean the rooms, and those Huntsberger girls, that was part of their ministry. And very much a practical part of this vibrant community at the time. Also in these pictures, besides the Huntsberger girls, are one of the Aiken sisters that was in the reunion picture from last week. She was pretty instrumental in the life of the academy there. One of their high-end female graduates. Also is in the picture there, you'll see Charles Manchester, one of the later presidents of Findlay College. He's principal of the academy at this time. And in the middle of that picture is Charles Manchester's brother, Fred, and his wife is sitting in the window there with one of their kids. They were I forget what they called them, the dorm parents, basically, for this boarding school. That was their role there. And they came from Kansas. So again, this wasn't just people from Western Pennsylvania here. There's a guy from Buda, Illinois there. William Harris Geyer, another one of the future presidents of Findlay College, is in this picture. Other folks from Alverton. Um, Even in this small group, you've got kind of a broad representation of the churches of God and across several different conferences. And it's here at this institution where um, we did our earliest theological training to train pastors. No, it wasn't at a college level, but it was still what they need, and it was a pretty high end education. They didn't just get um, biblical studies and theological studies; they got classical studies, which meant Latin and Greek and German, classical history, kind of a broad sense of education, an integrated approach to education. Um, the classical approach to education took the classic problems and the classic solutions across several millennia. And it was a very good broad stroke approach to education. And it laid an important foundation. Didn't matter if you were going to be a teacher or a mechanic or a farmer, learning how to think, learning how to problem solve, those things were a part of the education. And of course, if you're going to be a missionary or if you're going to pastor well, you also need to know how to think and how to care and how to be diplomatic. And all of that stuff is laid in that classical education. Um, Here also, they got their first taste of ministry. This is the time when we were planting many of our churches. They were young churches. These were our young next generation ministers. And Charles Manchester was one of the ones that said, why wait till we sent them? You have them get their feet wet now, learn to preach now, learn how to work through their bugs, get over their fears and their insecurities now. And so that's what they did. They were required to do memorizations, they learned rhetoric, they did internships at some of the neighboring churches. It laid a good foundation for what, of course, Findlay College would do in the near future. But also, here is where they formed some of their lifelong friendships. Some of the colleagues in ministry for decades to come were started here. I can trace that through the photographs that we have of these folks. Many of them served 4, 5, 6 decades in the Allegheny region, and there they are, year after year, decade after decade, side by side, switching churches because they were moved every year, and so they had a pretty keen sense of what the conference was like and who the people of the conference were because they pastored them. But also here is where they started the missionary signal. It was Charles Manchester that started the missionary signal, still going today in some form. It started in Barkeryville with these people. Um, these were some of the busy bees, the Huntsberger girls, Hattie Aiken. They're the ones who crocheted and knitted things and quilted and made money, raised money, went around church to church asking for money to be able to support the start of our foreign mission. And of course, they were part of the sending. This group sent the Barkeryville pastor in 1902 to start the work there in Bogra, what is now Bangladesh, with Viola Hershey. It was very much their work, very much their initiative, uh, and very much hands-on. So it's an amazing legacy. I won't get into the whole missionary thing, but it's interesting at the time how Peter Laux and Henry Barkey, they didn't distinguish between mission and education. If it's about the gospel, it's about making disciples and sending them. And that's education and mission go hand in hand. And that was very much part of the vibrant dynamic that went on in those early years, not just in our educational institution, it was part of our DNA. Um, Eventually, of course, the Findlay College would take over this work. This was at the high school level, and they realized that rather than make people move twice, once the college was up and running, they moved that preparatory work, the classical and the scientific, over to Findlay College, and at that point, the best and the brightest started to filter that way, and they just went to Findlay, and the the academy closed in 1906 as a result, but not everybody moved to Findlay. A lot of these same families stayed in place, went through their ministry in Western Pennsylvania, and of course, um, wherever they were called to, wherever they lived out what they had learned as through being a part of this dynamic. It was a vibrant formational dynamic. It wasn't just filling their heads with stuff. It was about being transformed themselves. And it was a communal dynamic. None of us, again, can be the church by ourselves. And they learned um, it's always been an important part of theological education to do it together with someone else, because we can't learn what it means to love by ourselves. We need one another that way, and we need to work through our own issues that way, and we need to help others work through their issues, and we need to learn how to care, how to encourage, how to be generous, how to be humble, and those things we do not learn by ourselves. And there's only so much you can learn off of a screen, and even as you know, Phil, being part of a cohort brings out things you never would have thought of in a million years by yourself. And well, it's interesting to look over the course of time how some things change, and it's easy to track the changes. But it's also a way of seeing how some things don't change. They remain the same generation after generation after generation, and those things that don't change are the kinds of things that we need to cling to, hold on to, cherish, and continue to invest in. because that's the kind of thing that passing the torch from one generation to the next involves.
I do have a question, and
Sure.
I don't know if you can answer it or not, but do you know the year that this picture was taken or approximate?
1895, because Hattie Aiken's in it.
1895.
Yeah,
I am the first time I saw this picture, right, I was at the academy, I think, when I
yeah,
was walking through. And one of the things that really struck me was and is the number of women that are present in this picture. And I think it speaks to our culture,
yeah.
our overall culture, our personal culture, our
Yeah, yeah. I'll be talking about that at some point. But the Huntsberger girls, of course, came from that Mennonite background, and they never even thought about it. The Mennonites didn't have the hang up that a lot of groups had. Men and women lead. And it's apparent in these pictures, like you said, John Latchaw did not have that hang up either. So from the beginning, the Barkeryville Academy was co-ed, and so was Finley College.
impressive talks to our
Mm,
strong roots and the value of the
yeah.
individual, the person, the calling.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. So informative. These are such important parts of our history. Not just our history, but the way that God has woven his story together using us.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it. So I hope that you are appreciating this too. This is God's story with us. This is our shared history, and this is part of who we are. So remember that as we launch off into our own missional efforts, that we can come alongside and we could do this together. Look at what can be accomplished. Um, keep shining. We'll talk to you next week. All right. And so long. Thanks, Rob.